Yes guys, welcome back to another Fantasy Football Fix YouTube video. My name is FPL Nacho, and in this video we are looking at the best differentials going into game week 22. I know game week 21 hasn't finished yet, but I think it is worth noting these players in advance for your teams, because really we need to have these on our radars because a lot of managers do. So as always, if you're looking forward to today's video, please do drop a like and of course smash that subscribe button. It'd be amazing to have you for the second half of the season. Without further ado, let's get into this first differential. So there should be no surprises that Kevin De Bruyne is going to be the first differential that we're talking about. Now, I say differential, he's been one of the most bought players last week and going into game week 22 already, off the back of that performance against Newcastle. He only played 20 minutes but rocked up with a goal and an assist, kind of throwing back what we do know about Kevin De Bruyne and why he is such an unbelievable FPL option for our teams. But the big question right now is, do we need to start buying him in our sides? I know a lot of people have already done it, but for those that haven't already, I think we're probably all in a similar boat where we've either sold Mo Salah, we have loads of money available, and you're thinking to yourself, how long until Erling Haaland's back? Because if he isn't back, maybe I go in early on Kevin De Bruyne. And I think the other food for thought is, it's just too early to get Kevin De Bruyne, because we know sooner or later we're going to need that money allocated to Mo Salah once he's back from the African Cup of Nations. So it's a real difficult balancing act right now, but it does feel like with the upcoming fixtures, if you don't go early with him, it's probably not worth going early, not buying him at all. So let's deep dive into a few of the underlying numbers right now. Of course, because he's been injured all season, we don't literally have any stats to go off. So we're going to look at the numbers based on last season, just to give us an indicator of what kind of asset he is. So currently priced at 10.4 million, he is right up there as a premium. And again, when we've been considering the alternatives like a Phil Foden, like a Richarlison, he's 3 million more expensive than these players. So we really do need to be confident that buying someone like Kevin De Bruyne is right for our FPL team. So his XG last season was 0.16 per 90. And again, I don't see that really changing this season. Yes, he might get deployed a little bit further forward more regularly due to him just getting a bit older and leggy. They might not really want him in the first phase of play going box to box like he used to do. So we might see him actually occupying more time in that final third, which may increase that expected goals. But right now, I think that his sole purpose in this Man City team is going to be that chief creator role. And again, the XA per 90 last season of 0.5 highlighted that. And I think we're going to see the exact same thing once again. Looking at the attempted assists, 3.64. He is just an absolute beast. And at 10.4 million, while he's unbelievable FPL value, we need to understand that we're not necessarily scoring a guy that's going to score week in, week out from these midfield positions. Yes, the goal against Newcastle was amazing, but I'm not really anticipating that to be a weekly occurrence for somebody like Kevin De Bruyne. I think we're going to see lots of assists, and once Erling Haaland returns to the team, it's only going to increase the potential of Kevin De Bruyne's outlet. Now, looking at the projected points, 12.9 over the next 4 game weeks, it's worth noting that is taking into account the minutes potential that we are seeing with him. And I think that's the big factor that we need to talk about. The fixtures coming up are fantastic. Burnley at home, Brentford away, Everton at home, and then a double in 25. Make sure you do note that. And importantly, they definitely play in game week 26, whereas some other teams are going to blank. So he is long-term a fantastic option for our FPL teams. The big problem right now is I just don't think Kevin De Bruyne is going to play consistently 90 minutes in all of these fixtures. And when we're paying 10.4 million for a player, yes, he is explosive and yes, he can do the damage in 30 minutes, but I don't really feel confident relying on a Newcastle performance every single week to deliver the returns that I've paid. Now, looking at the schedule, the good news is that prior to the Burnley game, they do have an FA Cup 4th round game against Spurs on the 26th of January. The Burnley game is then on the 31st of January. So I think to myself, if he starts that FA Cup game and plays significant minutes, I would then actually be worried about his game time midweek afterwards. It's only 4 or 5 days later. He is obviously building up to match fitness. I'd be concerned of him starting against Burnley. And then I think this situation is going to keep continuing. After the Burnley game, Brentford is only 5 days later. The Everton game is 5 days later after the Brentford game. Then they have the Champions League involvement against Copenhagen, which is away. I think they're going to want him in that game. And then, of course, they have the double game week, which is Chelsea 4 days later, and then Brentford 3 days after that. So the fixtures are fantastic. And when you look at it on a ticker like this, it looks like he's an obvious buy. But when we actually take into consideration the time rests between each game, I'm a little concerned that Pep is going to go very, very careful with De Bruyne. We might see a situation where he does 60, 25, 60, 25. And for 10.4 million, I just feel like there are better value assets out there in the game. However, if Haaland becomes unavailable long term, if Mo Salah stays in the African Cup of Nations, we do need to spend the money. And if he is benched in that FA Cup game and Haaland's ruled out for game week 22, I don't mind managers going for De Bruyne then. Otherwise, if Haaland's available, I think we just ignore De Bruyne and we go to Erling Haaland as our differential. So, differential. Not really differential, is he? But look. Anyway, let's move on to the next differential because this is a player that's returning from injury, similar to De Bruyne, and I think he needs to be on our radar. So that is going to be Spurs' Maddison. Now, he has returned to full training, our understanding, but he hasn't actually played any minutes right now. So while we are looking at differentials for game week 22, I would need to see him perform in the FA Cup game against Man City to even consider him as an FPL option. But similar to Kevin De Bruyne, we are in a position where even if Maddison does feature in that FA Cup game, we would have to have some doubts about his game time over the next 3 or 4 game weeks. But I want to remind you guys about how fantastic he was as an FPL option for our teams prior to the injury, because it does feel a long time ago since that Chelsea defeat. So 7.8 million, his price hasn't really dropped that much, but I still think he's great value at 7.8. And once again, kind of highlighting why it's really difficult to go to Kevin De Bruyne when we got people like James Maddison at 3 million cheaper, and you'd argue just as much of a talisman in their respective teams. So 0.27 XG per 90, he actually had decent numbers there, but importantly was the chance creator in that Spurs team at 0.35 per 90. So we are basically getting like a watered down Kevin De Bruyne version in this Spurs team. Big chances created at 0.61. When he was playing, it felt really hard to ignore James Maddison in FPL because Richarlison wasn't really an option at the time. Son we deemed too expensive, so James Maddison was just the perfect investment in that Spurs team. Now, it's worth noting, a few months on, Richarlison is now an option playing as a number 9. Son has become an option in FPL. Kulusevski's even become an option. So I do think to myself, is he as desirable as what he once was when he was kind of the only option in that Spurs team? So we do need to kind of make note of that. And look at the fixtures coming up. They're decent. Brentford at home, Everton away, Brighton at home, which I think is a really good goal scoring fixture, and then Wolves at home. The big issue that you do need to remember is that game week 26 is a potential blank for Spurs if Liverpool-Chelsea is the final in the Carabao Cup, which we will get a basically understanding of before the game week 22 deadline. So if we do find out that Spurs are a blank for game week 26 and you're not free hitting in that week, I think it's quite difficult to go to James Maddison for game week 22 because you know he's going to blank in game week 22. You got players who double in game week 25 and he might not even feature in game week 22. So with that all said, I think James Maddison needs to be on your radar if he features in this FA Cup game on the 26th of January, and he definitely needs to be a consideration later down the line. But if all of those factors come about, I think he's in a void for now. Wait until game week 26 is panned out, where then we'll know the fixtures for Spurs long term. Then we can look to invest Maddison longer term in our size and maybe just a set and forget if Richarlison does come out of the team once Son returns from the Asian Cup. So for me, Maddison, definitely a consideration for your teams, but I wouldn't be jumping in right now with that Brentford home fixture unless you really, really want to take that minutes risk. So we've covered Kevin De Bruyne, we've covered James Maddison. I feel like we need to talk about some defenders going into game week 22 that I definitely think are not being spoken about enough. So I wanted to bring up the Man City pair of Kyle Walker and Gavardia. Now, of course, this video is all about differentials, and Kyle Walker doesn't really tick that box right now. He's around 17% owned, whereas Gavardia was only 3% owned. And I think anybody who's played FPL for the last few years, especially since Pep has been involved, it has always been about, we want to have a piece of the Man City defence because usually they are quite reliable, but we just never know what defender to go for. Cancelo was really the only player that we could get in years gone by, but now he's left. And Edison just doesn't really feel like a good FPL investment. So the defenders have always been the one that we want to buy, but just never really known where to go to. Now, Kyle Walker has been an ever-present in that Man City team this season. Seems like since they sorted out that contract dispute, they've kind of guaranteed him minutes. And I think Kyle Walker's been a good purchase this season, although obviously Man City clean sheets have been far and few between. But at 5.4 million, with the underlying numbers that we're seeing on your screens here, 0.01 XG, 0.08 expected assists, and 0.3 bonus per 90, I just can't really justify paying for Kyle Walker as a creative asset. I think we're only really buying him for the fixtures coming up and also the defensive opportunities that we could see. Burnley at home, I think, is a clean sheet potential. Brentford away with their attacking problems, but of course, Ivan Toney is now back. Everton at home looks okay, and the double, of course, in game week 25. So I think having a piece of the Man City defence is an ideal situation, especially in preparation for the double game week 25. But I just don't know whether Kyle Walker is necessarily the answer when we have so many other fantastic attacking fullbacks available in the game. I would probably like to be a bit cheaper, especially if we're not going to get any sort of attacking returns. And that's why I think Gavardiol is definitely an option. 3% owned, 4.8 million. So he is 6 million cheaper than Kyle Walker. And I think all of that difference makes a huge factor with your teams going forward, especially when we're trying to squeeze in all of these premiums. Now, 0.07 XG per 90. Anybody that's been watching Man City recently and looked at the touch heat maps, Gavardiol has actually been a real attacking influence in that final third, keeping the width for the team, but also actually making some decent runs into the box. So I don't think Gavardiol has become this back three player that we once thought he was going to be, with John Stones inverting into the midfield. We're now seeing basically two centre-backs hold the pitch, and then the fullbacks bombing on, and Gavardiol is actually occupying that position. So 0.07 XG per 90, it's not amazing, but it's still decent numbers, and 0.04 expected assists. The bonus points haven't necessarily been there for him, but when I look at the two, I personally think that if I was to invest in a Man City defender right now, I would take the punt on Gavardiol. I think he's established himself in the team. I'm looking at the minutes right now, and he has been a consistent starter for a long time now. The only real games that he's missed has either been due to injury or due to a slight tactical tweak that Pep Guardiola has done. So he's been Mr. Consistent, and I think he's flying under the radar right now. And in preparation for that double game week 25, and of course then playing in game week 26, I think he could be quite a shrewd pick for your FPL teams, and I would choose Gavardiol over Kyle Walker. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'm looking at Gavardiol as a potential transfer for game weeks 23 or 24, just to get him in for those home games, because I think clean sheets are on the horizon for Man City. So let me know your thoughts in the comments on both Gavardiol and, of course, James Maddison and De Bruyne. And that just leaves me to say that is going to wrap up today's video. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, if you haven't already, please do drop a like and smash that subscribe button. I know we're also midway through game week 21, but we are still dropping content between now and that game week 22 deadline. So make sure you are clicking that notification bell. Have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Cheers.